Yeah, why don't you host for today?
Okay, I think it started.
Can you?
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our Sunday weekly live streams from Không, Biết. This is Duke, and my name is Tran Wan, and then we're back again for another great discussion about the current humanitarian crisis in Myanmar. So, first, we wanted to talk a little bit about the history to Myanmar, and who would be better to introduce that than Anduk right here?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Sunday evening, as always. Now, we wanted to start off by giving everyone a quick background of Myanmar, its modern history, and why things are the way they are structurally in the country. Now, some of you may know Myanmar by its traditional name. It's Burma. Now, Myanmar had um, in the 1880s, it had become a British colony slowly between 1880 and 1890, where it was incorporated as a province of India by the British. Great Britain had colonized Myanmar, and up until about World War II, when Japan had basically had moved into Southeast Asia to extract resources to what they would call liberating Southeast Asian colonies from European powers. But in fact, what we know is that they were looking to extract resources for their own use. Myanmar was a part of their plan, and during that. During those battles, a number of military leaders rose up, and one of the most prominent one was General Aung San. Now, after World War II, a number of factions in Myanmar were able to declare, or they were able to negotiate independence with Great Britain, and Myanmar around 1948 had declared independence. And General Aung San was, for the most part, the leader of the country. And if you think that Aung San, if the word Aung San's ring familiar to you, there's a reason why, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Anyhow, so General Aung San had been the leader of the country from 1948 until about 1962, when he was assassinated. There was a military coup. By other factions to take over the government. His family had been in India at the time, and then they had fled to Britain afterwards. And from 1962 to about 2011, Myanmar was ruled under an authoritarian regime led by military leaders. And during in the 80s, General Aung San's daughter, her name is Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, if that name is familiar to you, there's a reason why Aung San Suu Kyi had come to Myanmar in the 80s, and she had tried to reinvigorate and start a number of pro-democracy movements. She was then placed under house arrest from about 1988 through 2010, and around 2010 she was released from house arrest. And in 2011, Myanmar had its first democratic elections, where Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the National, and I'm going to look up the name again. It's the National League for Democracy, or NLD. They were able to win a number of seats the uh, in the legislature of Myanmar. And then in 2015, they were able to win majorities in both the House of Representatives and the House of Nationalities. Now, Myanmar does have a bicameral legislature, and because they were able to win both houses, they were able um, to control the government and place a president in
Yes, this
power.
is a
Now, the
yeah.
president, yes. Now, the now even though now Aung San Suu, it's a very complicated situation where Aung San Suu Kyi, she is barred from holding the office of the presidency, but everyone knew, and Aung San Suu Kyi was very open about the fact that had the National League of Democracy, had they won, she will be the de facto leader. And in 2016, they had created a position for her called the state councillor. And under that position, she was the de facto leader of Myanmar, even though there was a president, but that president was serving under her guidance. And everyone has to understand too is that even though the NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi were able to hold these official titles, hold these official positions, the military still retained quite a significant amount of control, and Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD had to play a balancing act with them, because at any point in time, the military can go in and regain control of power, and that is exactly what we saw in February of this year. Juan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so these are among the many military coups that has happened during Myanmar, which is also Burma history. One of which is that after its independence, mentioned from the British rule in 1948, that Anduk mentioned, the entire history has been taken over and taken over by a one-party regime, which in this case is a military power, which works in favor of the military. And one keynote is back in March 1988, which is signifies the 8888 uprising, which is when Aung San Suu Kyi first really take her role as the leader of the rebellion group, or the leader to remove military rule from Myanmar and go towards a more democratic approach for the country. But however, in September of that same year, Aung San Suu Kyi was placed under house arrest, and the rebellion was crushed. However, the people of Myanmar still wants to work towards to that democracy, and that's where the NLD, which is the National League of Democracy, stated again. That's where it start gaining more and more popularity. And so a keynote is also that Aung San Suu Kyi actually won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1991, which signifies her as one of like the world leader when it comes to trying to do the right thing in Myanmar. And then from there, in 2015, to get that first free open election where the NLD party won in a just very won very well. But the constitution dictates that the other party, which is run by the military, which I believe it's the USDP, they retain 25% of the seat, which you would need over 75% of the parliament seats in order to be able to make any amendments or reforms for constitution. So the 25% that is held by the supported party actually caused them to prevent blocks a lot of reforms as well as amendment to the constitution, which bring us now back to the 2020-ish election where Aung San Suu Kyi's main main goal is to remove the military power, which obviously caused a lot of worry and anger from the military portion of Myanmar that eventually led to the rise of the military coup in February 1st, 2021. So ever since then, a lot of people have been, working really hard in order to get Aung San Suu Kyi out of house arrest and return to this democracy. And we see a lot of young people in the protest, which dictates that they have the first taste of democracy and they don't want that to go away. And that is important that we see that for this country.
All right, and I wanted to rewind back a little bit back in the history of Myanmar and why Aung San Suu Kyi was released in 2010. As one had mentioned, Aung San Suu Kyi was placed under house arrest in 1988, and it wasn't until about 2010 when she was released, and then of course 2011 was the first time they had the elections. And there were main reasons why the government of or three reasons I should say why the government of Myanmar or the military of Myanmar wanted to ease up on their control. Number one was the reliance on China. They have realized that, or they noticed that they have noticed the growing power of China in the region and have become more concerned because between 1962 and 2010, so between 1962 and up until that time, the U.S. had placed very strong sanctions against Myanmar, which means the U.S. and most Western powers, most developed countries, including Japan and Korea, were not openly trading with Myanmar. And Myanmar was really dependent on China for its economy and for its production. And one thing that Myanmar is rich in is natural resources, including timber and natural gas. And that's what kept the military in power. That's what kept them funded, and that's what kept their leaders rich throughout the years. Even though their people were living, I believe it's 75, 80% of the people were living well below the international poverty line. I love your dog right there. One. So while 75, 80% of their population was living under the international poverty line, the military elite and the government elite of Myanmar were very well off. It's because of their natural resources, and a lot of that was dependent on trade with China. And in 2010, the government of Myanmar realized that they are too dependent on China, and that China's growing clout and China's growing prowess as a superpower in the world was a threat to them. So that was in part what drove them to open up relations with the West and open up a more democratic government and system in their government. And the other prong of it is the Obama administration under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the time. They decided to push forward with normalizing relationship with Myanmar, despite some Republican opposition, and say, it was the right time. And then the third issue was that the military leaders of Myanmar were just really getting old, and I believe the president at that time, he's kind of saw the end of his life coming, so it was just a natural process for them to say, hey, we're ready, let's just open up relations with the West and let's free ourselves from our entanglement with China. And that's how Aung San Suu Kyi was released in 2010 after years and years of sanctions from the US that yielded really no results. And then, as we discussed, in 2011, they had their first elections. And then 2015, Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the NLD, was able to win a majority of seats, and that placed her as the de facto leader of the country.
Wow, Anduk, that's a lot of informative information. And I hope our audience know how much we have researched in order to bring you guys all these information. So
yes, and I know it's a lot of information, but for us to really discuss some of the issues further down our agenda here today, you have to really understand you have to have a basic understanding of Myanmar's history up until the present day.
yeah, and then the thing about it is Myanmar, with its vast resources, could have been very successful due to all the the resources, from natural gas to, again, timber, gold, rubies, and jade. But the reason why it's not successful is because of the lack of economic growth, as well as the constant extensive poverty and military dictatorship, as well as the civil war that consistently happened to prevent Myanmar from becoming a successful country. So that's why, in the hopes of going towards more democracy and going towards more development, then it could be successful. But now that we have the military coup, that seemed to have put a halt on a lot of things.
All right.
So
So
yeah,
go ahead.
let's go to the second part of our section, which is to talk about what happened back in February 1st, 2020. What has led to that insurrection and military coup of the government?
All right. So I'll begin. So in 2020, Aung San Suu Kyi again had campaigned for further restricting of the military's role in governing the country, as you had discussed earlier on, and in the parliamentary. As Americans, we never use the word parliament, so I do apologize for my mispronunciation of that word. But in the parliamentary elections in November, her party won a sweeping victory, and that gave her basically a mandate to pursue those changes. And the military, of course, saw that as a direct threat to their power, and the generals claimed that there was an election fraud. And if that sounds familiar to any of our viewers out there, we don't know where they took the cues from, but that's what happened. They claimed election fraud. They went and placed Aung San Suu Kyi, her president, her cabinet, and the leaders of the NLD under house arrest, and claimed that they will have a fairer election afterwards. But of course, everything, all power has, all authority in the country has been placed under General Min Aung Hlaing. I may have mispronounced that. I do apologize. It's General Min Aung Hlaing. He is the leader of the military, and he is the de facto leader of the country at this time. Aung San Suu Kyi herself, she is placed under house arrest, and because of the way the country controls, visitors, controls journalists. We don't have too many details coming out besides what's being leaked into social media by the citizenry at this time.
Yeah, and the thing to know is the reason why the military gets so wanted to put on this military coup or take over power only because uh, the leader right now of the party, Min Aung Hlaing, is known as like the most wanted man, and he's responsible for the killing of the people as well as burning villages for a lot of ethnic group that are located in the Rakhine state of Myanmar. I'll just show a quick picture. But basically, it's located near the tail area. I don't think you can see my mouse. Anyway, he's responsible for killing and burning the villages of these people, which are majority of like it's a small Muslim ethnic group, and he's wanted, on the national level, just because of how he treated these people. So overall, there's just been a lot of things that he wanted to hide, and he can't. He wanted to be able to keep that power, the military power, and he wanted to keep the amount of increase the amount of seats in the parliament in order to gain back that military power. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And speaking of Rohingya, it's a very controversial topic, and controversial with Aung San Suu Kyi herself. Now, one, it's really hard for us to discuss Myanmar and what's going on there in the last 5 years without discussing Rohingya. Now, Rohingya, in a lot of in a lot of people's mind, it's a genocide. Rohingya. Now, Myanmar is a majority Buddhist nation. It follows the people there follow the Theravada sect of Buddhism. Now, that's very different from Khom our Vietnamese families, our Vietnamese community. We follow their Mahayana. I'm sorry, Mahayana. Myanmar is under Theravada, and Theravada, it's more pure. It's more it's based more on the origins of Buddhism, whereas Mahayana has there's more evolution with Mahayana. Anyhow, so Myanmar has about 90% of its population following the Theravada sect of Buddhism, and only about 3-4% of the population is Muslim. And of course, the Rohingya population is a very small regional population there. And in 2017, there was widespread persecution of the Rohingya people, and there was a lot of anger toward Aung San Suu Kyi, and state crime experts from the Queen Mary University of London had warned that she was legitimizing genocide in the region. And in 2019, Aung San Suu Kyi herself had to appear in international court at The Hague in Switzerland, where she actually defended the Burmese military against allegations of genocide. And she, unfortunately, in her speech, did not use the word Rohingya, and she only described the allegations of genocide as incomplete and misleading, and said that the military action was just a response to attacks by the Arakan Salvation Army of the Rohingya people. And so there is a lot of issues there that we can discuss with Rohingya. And one result of the Rohingya attacks, or the Rohingya persecutions, is that a lot of a lot of developed countries have pulled out investments from Myanmar a lot. And what that has done for this event now is that we don't have a lot of leverage left in Myanmar, because a lot of investments, a lot of Western money is no longer in Myanmar, because they were pulled out after the Rohingya I'm going to say genocide after that event.
Yeah, and to add to that, the military itself, as Duke said earlier, has a vast majority of resources from the natural resources that are found in Myanmar. So they don't have a lot of incentives, even if there is external pressure from China, from India, even from the US. Even though we place pressure on them, there's not much that they can do, because first, it's not like they're planning to become a first world power in any way. And second, they have no incentive to try not to grab as much power as they can, since they already hold most of the power and the resources in Myanmar anyway. And that's why it's really important to talk about why they wanted to be able to grab more power. And this brings up to a really good quote by Aung San Suu Kyi herself, which is, "It is not the power that corrupts the fear, but the fear of losing power that corrupts the people that wield it." And I think that applies especially well when it comes to the current military coup in Myanmar.
All right. So then that brings us to the next question. What was the U.S. response? And Juan, do you want to tackle that one? Or you want to start with that one, or do you want me to?
I can try to start with that one. So basically, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, even if U.S. put a lot of pressure, it seems to not have as much of an effect as we would like, from the U.S. as a superpower, because back during the Trump presidency era, he has lost a lot of the control that we would have as a superpower. So when President Biden has been, inaugurated, he put pressure. He put pressure. He made an official statement to put pressure onto the military coup to free Aung San Suu Kyi, and then relinquish. They have to relinquish any power they have seized, and release activists and official. And while doing this, currently it hasn't let up. I guess it hasn't let up, and they already actually killed up to around 50 or more people, by shooting in the crowds, by rubber bullets, by attacking medical personnel, et cetera, et cetera. So these are pressure that the U.S. has put, but it seems to not have as much of an effect to the Myanmar people as they would like. So yeah.
Yes. So as Juan had mentioned, the President Biden had basically condemned the event as a coup, and he had placed he is considering reimposing the sanctions that we had placed on Myanmar from 1962 to 2010, and that's why we thought we wanted to discuss those sanctions at the beginning of our program here. So that would again put a lot of pressure onto Myanmar that's going to devastate Myanmar's economy. Now, the problem is, will Myanmar be able to trade without with the sanctions from the US? And really, what that means is that will they be able to trade with China and with Russia, but primarily with China? And that's going to be our next topic. So we're not going to jump too far ahead. But right now, as we've seen from, the sanctions from the 1960s through 2010, they had very limited success, and it wasn't until Myanmar saw the threat of a growing Chinese superpower that they had opened relations with the U.S., or not just with the U.S., but with the Western world, and with a free market economy there. So yes, we can place the sanctions. The question is, can we make it hurt for the military elites? Because we can hurt we can hurt Myanmar, but are we going to hurt the people of Myanmar, or will we hurt the military elite of Myanmar? And so that brings us to our next question, which is, what is China's involvement in all of this, and why does China matter? And did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up this fun graphic that I
Mhm.
screenshotted. But basically, China has, favored Myanmar only because of it's planning to create this trade route, which is the CMEC that connects at least mid China to the sea, so that way it can cut, the trade route from on the South China Sea to become a lot more shorter to be able to reach more people. And so because of that, it has conflict of interest when it comes to trying to get them trying to kind of like appease the Myanmar, because it doesn't know to either appease the military government or the democratic government. But from what it seems like, I don't know where what is standing right now, but maybe you
Right.
can help with that.
Well, just a brief trivia too. Myanmar and China had a very important legacy dating back to World War II. Now, during World War II, if anyone knows the history of China during that time, Japan had basically taken over the coast of China, and for the British and the U.S. to help fund and support the what was then the Republic of China in their effort against Japan, a lot of military resources, a lot of weapons, a lot of airplanes were funneled through Myanmar and into Kunming, which is part of your map right there. If you had
Oh, you
pulled
want
up,
me to back up?
yeah, so you don't have to back up the map, but as we know, Myanmar had always been a strategic in a had always been in a strategic position in relations to China, because Myanmar traditionally is China's gateway into the Indian Ocean, bypassing Southeast Asia, bypassing Singapore and the Strait that was traditionally controlled by, or not traditionally, but had been at time controlled by Western powers, and then at times been controlled by the Japanese, and of course by local governments, including our own back in back in the days of antiquity. And so where as far as our research, and as far as what we've been able to read from analysts, China does not know where it stands right now. It's taking somewhat of a neutral stand. Really, what it wants is a stable Myanmar, and it wants Aung San Suu Kyi in power, because Aung San Suu Kyi's government has been very favorable towards China in recent years, as opposed to um, the military government. And as I've discussed earlier, part of the reason why the military government had opened up relations with the West and had opened up had created a democratic system in the country was because of a fear of a growing China, and they did not want to fall too much under China's influence. So in China's what China is, what China sees as favorable to it is most likely going to be the NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi. Again, a very sustained and what's the word I'm looking for? But anyways, of a sustained Myanmar government, a stable Myanmar government. That's the word. That's what I meant to say. A stable Myanmar government is going to be in China's favor, and really, the NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi's government has been very favorable to China in terms of trade, in terms of in terms of all of China's economic activities in the country. And again, they have very, very large vested interests in Myanmar's timbers, natural gases, and trade jade industries. So natural gas, timber, and jade. And so right now, what China is trying to do, they are trying to step in and trying to negotiate between the military and the NLD. We don't know where that can lead. Of course, a lot of activists in Myanmar are very upset and saying that China can do a lot more because of its economic clout with the military. And as I've discussed earlier, the reason why the military was able to sustain power from the 1960s through 2010 was because of its sole very so its sole trade with China. And if China were to step in and put its foot on the ground, put its foot on the floor, we know that the military of Myanmar will have to really listen to them. And what they're doing right now is trying to broker a peace between the two parties. We don't know where that's going to lead at this time.
Yeah. And then similar things too for Indian, which is the India, I apologize, India, which is the other neighboring country for Myanmar. And in this case, it does also have conflict of interest when it comes to dealing with Myanmar as well, because like China, it would want a stable, democratic government to have better relationship. But at the same time, the military has been helped with decreasing like the military issues along the border of Myanmar and India. So it has mixed interest in both the the military side party as well as the democratic approach for the current Myanmar government. So in that case, that means that both the China and India are in a very difficult decision, and they're not really pushing really well. They're in a difficult position, I would say, in order to, because they're not sure how to be able to kind of like leave make the military release Aung San Suu Kyi as well as the other protesters and activists that are present, as well as um, kind of stop attacking the people that are currently protesting right now. So that's tough.
Yes. All right. And so then that brings us to our next question is, what effects, if any, might Myanmar have on neighboring countries such as Thailand? Now, we know that Thailand is effectively under a military junta right at this time. And we really are unclear. All Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia they are all backsliding on their democratic progress. And with Myanmar's troubles, we can see that as being a detriment to the development of democracy in a lot of Southeast Asian countries. And that may say to countries like our very own Vietnam, or to our people, is that democracy is there's a lot of turmoil involved. There's a lot of instability, and maybe having one country that we can somewhat sway one way or the other slightly, it's going to provide more stability as long as we can get the economic development and economic growth and sustain that. That matters more than freedom, political freedom and democracy.
Yeah. I was agree. Yeah, and another thing I wanted to note is that the USDP, which is the military-backed party, does not all support so most of it's also starting to lean towards to more reforms, such as just making sure that that to help also to starting to look at least leaning more towards to kind of like getting more reforms. And I think that's why the military got a little bit offensive, and that's why led to the potential attack. Yeah, but even then, all the neighboring countries, I agree with you in that sense that we kind of have to figure out how to be able to help Myanmar, because definitely currently, right now, the military cut off the internet as well as any social media, so the people have no way to be able to get this information out. So the few message that we're able to get across are being able to picked up by different news channels, and then from us at Không, Biết, which we think is important for us to be able to get this information out to our Vietnamese people, to be kind of like more aware of what's going on in our neighboring countries. And then should similar things arose, we should have, be able to back and help each other out. So I think that is really important for us to really think about.
Yes, and it's important to note that we are very limited in the kind of information that we're getting out of Myanmar at this time, and for what we know, um, a number of countries, including the U.S., South Korea, Japan, any country that has an economic interest in Myanmar has placed sanctions or had basically warned the military to basically release Aung San Suu Kyi and really open up the process. There is not much else we can do at this time, and we just have to wait and see as the situation develops. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Wait. We have questions.
We do have questions. Okay.
Yeah, so we have questions from Hui, which is, is there religious freedom in Myanmar? And for this one, I think no. Quick answer is no. But the majority of the religion in Myanmar is Buddhism, and then the rest of the percentage are of other, which is Christianity, Muslim, etc. And so with being controlled by the military, that has a lot of restrictions onto the religious freedom of Myanmar. So that would, yeah, so that also kind of like explain the ethnic cleansing, the genocide of the Rohingya people, and it's quite unfortunate.
Yes. So as we discussed earlier, about 90% of Myanmar's population is under the Theravada sect of Buddhism, and the rest fall under Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and I believe Jainism is part of that umbrella. And from what I've been able to understand, a lot of the religious minority aspect of it has to do with the ethnic minority. It's the religion and ethnicity really goes hand in hand in Myanmar. So the groups that are of a religious minority, they are actually of an ethnic minority as well. And one thing people may not understand with Myanmar is that there's a lot of ethnic civil war going on in the country at this time, and a lot of small ethnic groups have been fighting with the Myanmar military for decades and decades, and it doesn't get international coverage, it doesn't get media coverage, but it is happening. And we can kind of, if you want to draw a line back to China too, China also funds those smaller ethnic groups too, which is why the military of Myanmar has been so wary of China's involvement in their country. But that is a very complicated issue that we don't have us at Không, we tried to research that. There's not a lot of information available for us online on that, unfortunately, at this time.
And then the next question is from Duy Anh, which I'm gonna try to speak Vietnamese, so be patient with me. Dân chủ có phải là đang số thắng nhiều số, thiểu số? Nếu người Myanmar trưng cầu dân ý và đa số muốn loại người Rohingya ra khỏi đất nước họ thì có đúng không? Interesting.
Ok. Um, có nhiều chuyện mình có thể nói là why am I speaking Vietnamese?
It we're in the
Okay.
Vietnamese mindset.
Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
for your question, Yui.
There are certain things we can say majority rule, but I'm just gonna draw the example of the Supreme Court of the U.S. Why do we have a Supreme Court? A Supreme Court, a Supreme Court that is of equal power to the legislature and to the executive branch. So the presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court share equal power. Why is that? Why did the founding fathers of this country create that? The Supreme Court is designed to protect minority rights. That is embedded into our very democracy. Just because a majority wants to usurp the rights of a minority group, that does not make it democratic. That does not make it constitutional under US law. And that's why we have the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is there to defend minority rights. So if you're saying that just because the majority of people of Myanmar, whether that's accurate or not, wants to rid the country of Rohingya, that does not make it right, and that goes against the fundamentals of of the U.S. and the U.S.'s constitution, and it goes against our democracy.
That was well said, Duke. I in my opinion, they have created their livelihood, their community there, and they have settled, and it's part of their identity to be a part of Myanmar. And so, in my personal opinion, it's not right to uproot all these people to force them out of the country. That first of all, you don't really you just try to gather and hog all the resources, but it's their home too, it's their part of their identity. It's basically like the US kicking out Native Americans, which we have, and that's a problematic issue in itself. But having been able to gather all the resources and gaining the power from the land and the place, that doesn't mean you can kick out the people that originally lived there in the first place. And that's really good. That really, you can both look at this in a more human um, humanity rights, and then you can look at the economics, because in the humanities, right, it's not right to kick people out even if they're the minority, because they contribute. That's part of their home, that's part of their identity. And that's, I think personally, I don't know, that's very frustrating to be able to see. And it's right that the UN, as well as the different countries, have spoken up about this and how they're disagreeing with the tactics that the military, or in the case the Myanmar government did at the time. That was not the right way to be able to handle things, especially for these people that have very little to their name. So yeah, but
like I said, majority rule does not mean encroaching on the rights of the basic human rights of the minority. That is not what democracy is about. It has never been what democracy is about, and it's insulting that that is even a question. Moving on.
I mean, we could also be curious too. So thank you for asking us question. And obviously, like, we try our best to answer and what I think. And then, definitely, if you have any question, we are willing to answer, and hopefully, yeah, we'll be good. And then another question that we asked afterwards is, when do you think the Myanmar military will release these politicians? So right now, the military coup said that they will keep hold of Aung San Suu Kyi for around a year. So they're planning to keep the military coup going on for a year, and hopefully with the external pressure, it could be earlier that they would release. But I don't know how stubborn the military is at this day, because they're kind of on their last leg, and this is like their last chance to be able to gain back any military power. And I believe that is why they're being quite aggressive towards this issue. What is your thought, Anduk?
Yeah, I really don't know where things are gonna be. I feel like they haven't really, as far as them claiming that they're gonna run a more legitimate election. We haven't seen any plans for that. And we're in somewhat uncharted territories right now because they are reclaiming powers that they lost over the last decade. I think the honest answer is we don't know, and we just have to kind of wait and see what will happen.
Yeah. Hopefully the pressure from the from other countries will make, but they don't. Okay, so yeah, it's a very complicated issue, and obviously we always want to hope for the best, but that doesn't mean that it always happens. So I guess the last part of this live stream we just talk about, how will this coup impact the global markets, and the global economy. Yeah. um, there's a lot of information
Yeah.
there. What do you think, Andu?
Yeah. So as far as the global economy, Myanmar's GDP is around what, $80 billion a year, 80-90 billion dollars a year. It's not a massive impact on the global economy. It does provide a number of resources. It does provide some strategic points, but strategic locations, like we've discussed earlier, China can definitely use it as a way to bypass the Singapore Strait. But that has never been exploited. That has never really been taken, been used to its full advantage. So we're not going to really see any sort of economic impact to the rest of the world. What Myanmar contributes on a massive macro scale has been negligible over the last 50, 60 years or so. What we can see from Myanmar is the political implications moving forward. How secure, how stable are democracies in countries, in Southeast Asian countries like Thailand and Vietnam, or well, Vietnam's not even close to that yet, but Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Singapore, and even in African countries that do a lot more trading with Myanmar, and we can see, and if they look at to Myanmar as an example, that's something that will be of a concern for us.
Yeah, and definitely because Myanmar is quite is resource heavy with all the rare earth minerals and all the other majority of resources. It is kind of like a playing ground almost for a lot of the major world leaders to be able to invest, and that includes China, which we talked about earlier, where their interest in both the economic trade route as well as the all the resources that's available in Myanmar. They would have that interest, and if the military coup does prolong, maybe then China will be able to have more of an initiative to be able to put pressure on the military so that it can continue its work, which is building the economic route, as well as gather all these kind of like invest in the country to be able to get all these resources that would be very helpful in building its economic growth. And then another country, which is Singapore, has also invested a lot in Myanmar, and that includes in many industry regarding the real estate, food and beverages, and which has been disrupted due to the telecommunication outage, which is where the military cut off all the internet service, all the communicating methods in and out of Myanmar. So I believe they're also putting in a lot of pressure in order to get that back up so that it can continue its investment to kind of like promote the economics of both countries. So we don't know when it will open the country back up again, and I'm pretty sure that global economy are pressuring them to open the country so that it can kind of like be able to invest and build future infrastructures for Myanmar.
Yes, and Myanmar has a lot of potential for economic growth. Like we discussed, they have a lot of natural resources. They have a very strong population that is educated, that is ready to get to work. Unfortunately, and they are in a very good position geographically. Unfortunately, we with all the with the military unwilling to release its grip from control, foreign investment is not just going to be a pouring in to develop Myanmar into the country that it potentially could be. Right now, it's GDP per capita falls well behind Thailand, Vietnam, and even Cambodia, which lacks a lot of the resources that Myanmar has. So there's so much potential for Myanmar, but until it can have a stable government, until it can have open markets, and until it can have a strong, democratic government, and let's circle back here from 2010 to now. Even though Aung San Suu Kyi had grown her power had always been limited by the threat of a military coup, and that's why she had to compromise in a number of ways. But until Myanmar can have a strong, democratically elected government, it's not going to see its full potential economically, and the people will have to suffer until then.
Yeah, and it's unlikely, for the military to actually provide changes because they're sitting on a lot of money and power from the resources that they're hoarding. So that
Yeah,
is,
you know what's interesting, one.
yeah, what is it?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history about myself. I came to the U.S. in 1995. Do you know what happened in around 1995? In
I wasn't born
1994,
yet.
the U.S.
I wasn't
in
born
19 So I'm from, of course, I'm from Saigon, from Vietnam, and in 1994, the U.S. had opened up its relations with Vietnam. Same thing happened in Myanmar in 2011. And when I was watching the documentary of Myanmar in 2010, the scenery just reminded me so much of Vietnam in 1994, 1993, when I was a kid in Vietnam.
yet. It does. Oh, it
It's just,
reminds
it's,
me of Vietnam too. It reminds me when I look at all these footages, it's like, oh, I kind of
yeah.
miss home.
Yeah, it does. You look at these footages and you realize, we're as Southeast Asians, there's so much history, there's so much culture that we share. And
Yeah.
I saw the Yangon before, before they opened up the economy, and that was just, to me, that looked like Saigon of 1994, of course, with more cars, because what had happened in Myanmar is that they had banned motorbikes and scooters, whereas in Vietnam, of course, motorbikes and scooters and bicycles were 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 everywhere. In Myanmar, which is either cars or bicycles. But you look at the street grids, you look at the people, you look at just kind of like the street life. It was very much like Saigon in 1994.
Yeah.
And I just aged myself because I remember exactly what Saigon in 1994 is like.
I mean, you were quite young at then, so it left a really good like memory. I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
it's very different from Saigon today. I'll say that.
Okay, yeah. So to everyone that don't know, me and Duke were both born in Vietnam, but I left in 2005 and he left in 1995. So we do have a recollection of Vietnam, Vietnam as a young age, and I think that's why we kind of like reminisce a lot with Myanmar. And I think the reason why, like, speaking, from like an outside perspective, it's like if we weren't imperialized, during the colonialism period, would we have been able to make the economic advancement that we would have been able to today much earlier? You know what I mean? I mean, obviously it's important to open up and trade, and it's important to open up the country to be able to get new ideas, to like kind of like have new innovations, but then you're opening up yourself to the imperialism and the colonism of the first world country has caused it to be a little bit more complicated and actually hinders a lot of like the southeastern countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and we see an example a little bit of it in um, Myanmar from kind of like development being our own economic power in a way. And yeah, I don't know. This is just a minor thought.
It's very complicated because there were always a lot of internal strife too. There are a lot of conservatism within our government, within our Nguyen dynasty that was not able to embrace change, and similarly in Myanmar and other Southeast Asian countries. So
Yeah.
very difficult to say.
Yeah, but thank you everyone, for, asking a lot of questions. And I know you have another question, so we will answer that question and then we'll be able to wrap up the rest of our live stream. So Yui, after you ask, what after the Rohingya incidents, do you think Aung San Suu Kyi would continue to be an icon of the Myanmar democracy campaign? Um,
All right, and I will start this one. In my opinion, absolutely not. I think that she should give up her Nobel Prize, and I think that she is. And I understand why she was pressured into doing what she had to do, into supporting the military, um, into basically defending the military. But as a humanitarian and as someone who is highly regarded as a fighter for human rights, she does not deserve that recognition. She should give up that Nobel Prize, and she and you know and I, there are other things that she may, in my opinion, may be taken up on international court. But despite the fact that she was, well, I should say, yes, there was a lot of threat to her position and to her power in Myanmar. But at the end of the day, people were dying, people were being massacred. And as a human being, and as someone in a position of power, she should have spoken up. And that is my personal opinion. And I know that a lot of people in Myanmar, a lot of people that are affiliated with Myanmar have different opinions, but that is my own. Is that she should have spoken up against the massacre in Rohingya.
Yeah, and then Walanduk, I agree with what you said in the sense that she should be held responsible in any way for the massacre of the Rohingya people. I just have mixed feelings really about it because I guess like I wanted to see, once she come back, will she be able to make up for that? Like, will she able, like, what initiative she can do? And obviously I know that it's impossible to pay retribution to genocide. Like, how could anyone really be able to help, like, be able to kind of like give back to the people that you let killed and you let buried. And I think it's a tough position to really be in, especially because I'm pretty sure there were threats from the military regarding that aspect. And I don't know, I think this is where being a sorry about that this is where being a politics might be very difficult to handle when it comes to um, these very drastic issues. Sorry.
It's okay. And Aung San Suu Kyi herself had said she's not an activist; she is a politician. But at the end of the day, when you are a leader and there are people dying in your country and you don't speak out against it, or you don't use your power against it, you know that there are questions to be raised from that. Um, Very complicated, of course, and of course, a lot of Myanmar people from Myanmar look to her as still their beacon, and to their as their beacon of democracy and of hope and of their future. So, very difficult question to be asked, but we do have to have our opinions there.
Yeah, we appreciated you for asking the tough questions because I think definitely one person shouldn't be responsible for the automatic democracy because everyone has the potential to fail. And I think the more power you gain, the more you find out how corrupt you become. And hopefully we will have to see in the future if that's what Aung San Suu Kyi is made of. Like, how can she be corrupted from that. But then from there, I think this is a good time to end our live stream. So thank you everyone for participating and asking the question. And, really just kind of like thank you everyone for always joining us every Sunday. It's been a huge pleasure talking, learning about new things, really, for me. And having a discussion and seeing the different opinions and views and from us. So I'm really
All
thankful
right.
for seeing
Well,
that.
thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your weekend, and have a good Monday tomorrow.
Bye everyone from Không Nói Không Biết. Have a good weekend.